Hey everybody, how are you today? It's me, Mrs. Snook. It's getting me a little bit more time to put out these videos. I'll try to post them a little bit earlier. I'm adjusting as well to being at home remote while teaching my son's school as well, so it's been kind of a challenge this morning. So hopefully at this point you've taken your test and you've turned that in and you've gotten done your Gilded Age dinner party project and you've gone ahead and finished up watching those President video clips. If not, that's your first priority. And then you're going to want to watch this lecture, the lecture that I'll put out tomorrow, and you're going to want to get your vocab done for this week. I was going to have you guys do an exit slip, but I took that off to make your life a little bit easier. So it'll just be watching the two lectures, taking notes, doing the vocab, and if you want to do that Edpuzzle for extra credit, that's not due till November 27th. So we're moving into our new chapter today, and if you attended Monday's Google Meet or Tuesday's Google Meet, I started talking about how our new unit is on progressivism and imperialism. So we're basically going to be looking at the next chunk of time in American history, basically from about 1900 to about 1914 when World War I starts. Some people say you could start a little bit earlier than this. Some people say go even to 1920. It's kind of debatable. But basically, the Gilded Age caused problems. And if you attended Monday or Tuesday's Google Meet, we talked about how it led to political, economic, and social problems. And so if you didn't attend that Google Meet, it's okay. I'll be posting kind of that document from Monday, Tuesday's Google Meet, probably with tomorrow's lecture, with some more details filled in for it. But there were problems about living in the Gilded Age. And so my question to have you think about to begin is, what is it about living in the Gilded Age that you probably wouldn't have liked? Like, what would have been bad, basically, about this time period? And as some of you were in class and we did that factory simulation, you told me that the work was boring. You didn't like factory work. You didn't feel like you were paid well enough. You felt like your needs were ignored. You felt like it was unfair or unsafe, as many of you got injured on the job. And you didn't feel like if you joined a labor union, like it would bring about any change. So it was a difficult time period. And it didn't seem like the government really cared about you either. So these were a lot of political, economic, social problems that existed. So this next period of time is going to be about the progressive era. And progressive, of course, has the word progress in it. So we're focusing on how to make America better, how to change America, how to fix the problems that were created by the Gilded Age. Since it was a time period of intense economic development, it was a time period where you had these robber barons who had ideas, opening up huge companies and having vast amounts of wealth. But the vast majority of Americans, we said, 11 out of the 12 million people, were extremely poor, living in poverty-like conditions with $400 or $500 a year as an annual salary. And many of them are living in slums. The cities are overcrowded. They're not well paid. And their rights are not really being heard in the government since many people are not allowed to vote, or basically their votes are being bought off by some kind of political machine in exchange for a job or favor. So all of that needs to change. So what we're going to be looking at in the first part of this chapter is we're just going to be talking about who are these progressives and what reforms did they seek and how successful were the progressive era reforms basically in improving America. And yet again, some historians will call this about a 30-year period of change. Other people focus on that, 15 years before World War I. The dates aren't really that important, but we're going to be looking at basically the political, the economic, the social reforms, and were they successful. These are just kind of our key questions, or what we're going to be focusing on and learning more about as far as our goals. You don't have to write any of this down. And remember, these are your notes, and I'll be posting them coming up here, probably over Thanksgiving break, under classwork, under the notes section. So it's up to you how much you really want to write down. But today we're just going to talk a little bit about specifically some of the social reforms that were happening, and we'll get a little bit into the economic or moral reforms, the political reforms, and some of the national changes I'll save for tomorrow's lecture. So just to get down the basics here, the first part of our chapter, as I said, is going to be focusing on information from chapter 8 on the progressive era, fixing the problems that were created from the Gilded Age. And we're not going to be focusing on the whole chapter, just kind of breaking it apart with bits and pieces. Because of COVID, we're not going into as much depth. And you will have a quiz early when we get back from Thanksgiving break. So probably that Wednesday, December 2nd, our last remote day before we go back to hybrid. If we go back to hybrid, I don't know. But it could be a day or two later. And then the second half of the chapter will be focusing on imperialism. So first half is kind of what's happening in America in terms of domestic problems or problems at home. And then we'll be looking at imperialism, basically what's happening in terms of our foreign affairs, imperialism, or our desire to take over others as we kind of look at tensions that heat up in the world prior to World War I. And then, you'll anticipate for December a quiz, a test, another small project, but no final exam. I really going to push for that today in our department meeting, that I don't want to do a final for you guys. I think it's just too overwhelming with everything going on. So I just want to do one more test, one more project, one more quiz in December, and then that's it. So I think you guys have enough on your plate. So moving on. Hopefully at this point you've written this down, that progressivism is this movement based on the idea that new ideas and honest, efficient government could bring about social justice. And this is really about social justice. It's trying to help the lower aspects of society. And you have to remember, it's a time period where there really isn't a middle class. Remember, we said that the idea of a middle class was kind of a new concept that had first been created during the Gilded Age, as corporations grew so large that the CEOs, the Carnegie, the Rockefellers of the world, didn't want to go into the factory every day and make sure that you weren't 5 minutes late for your shift. They hired managers to do that, and they paid them well to kind of run their companies. And those people who were paid more than the average worker, those managers, they were the ones who then could shop at the department stores, had time to go to baseball games, lived kind of a better life. But most people are poor, and we're seeing that, this is a real push to help the poor, who make up the vast majority of American society. So this progressive or reform era definitely goes from about 1900 to about 1914, 1915, once World War I begins. And it's actually led by the middle class, specifically a lot of middle class women. The difference between a middle class family and a poor family was that the middle class families, the women didn't have to work. They could stay home, they could take care of the children didn't have to work, the husband made enough money to take care of the family. That was the goal for most poor families. The children could even get some kind of education and stay in school. And many of these middle class women, besides taking care of their family, they realized kind of through doing church work and charity work in the community how many poor families there were, how many families were in dire need because the children were working, because somebody had been injured at the factory, and they really wanted to push for change. And we also saw they got their husbands involved, and so this was really kind of a push by middle class women and then also men to bring about change. And they got their political parties involved and really said, we need to address some of these major issues. Specifically, what they really cared about was what was happening in terms of industrialization. And you don't need to write down like all the words that are here in parentheses. If you do, that's fine. But yet again, these are your notes. And since I'm posting them online, you can always print them out or look back at them digitally or however you like to do it. But they said, the real problem is with the businesses themselves. The fact that we have the economic power in America in the hands of a few very wealthy robber barons who are not paying their workers enough, making them work in, terrible conditions for long hours. And if people do try to organize into a labor union, they're called anarchists, which people who are against the government. They're called communists, people who are focused on equality, but they're looking at these terrible people and they go on strike, and then the cops are called in and they often turn into violent strikes and people get fired, and it's a disaster. And progressives really also wanted to clean up the slums. They said just because people are poor and they're pouring into America and they're coming in these huge immigration waves, why do they have to live in these apartments where they're completely filthy, the roof's leak, there's no bathroom? It just seems completely wrong. And there's also going to be a big push, especially by these middle-class progressive women, for more rights for women. They're going to start saying, clearly, we can take care of our families and do more. Why don't we have the right to vote? Especially as some women in the Western states are now getting the right to vote in local and state politics. Women are going to start pushing for that right in the Midwest and on the East Coast, and eventually they're going to be pushing for, why can't we vote for the president? So we're going to see this move towards suffrage, and we're also going to see, a push for the rights of African Americans, at least in the North. In the South, of course, it's where the heart of Jim Crow is. People are going to think that segregation laws are normal. Of course, African Americans are not, But whites who are running the society, they think they're normal. They're living with a very racist, biased kind of attitude. But there will be a push, at least in the northern communities, to try to end some of those segregation laws, rather unfortunately, though. And the goal, of course, to bring about this change, how they're going to do it, is they want the government to pass laws focused on reform. So really, what we're looking at is they're trying to get laws passed to improve our economy, to improve our society, to improve our morals, and to basically give people more political rights. And yet again, if you don't want to write this down in this kind of format like this, I'll be putting out a document tomorrow which kind of breaks it up into different categories, the way we looked at in Monday and Tuesday's Google Meet. So the man that you see in the picture is Teddy Roosevelt, and his name is Theodore, and we'll be talking about him towards the end of our chapter. I won't get to him till after Thanksgiving break. He is considered the true progressive era president. And the reason we say that he's the true progressive era president is he focuses on getting Congress to pass so many new laws to help America and to really improve it. And he eventually goes on to create a whole new political party called the Progressive Party, which is why we truly think of him as a progressive president. But the goals of people like Teddy Roosevelt and these other progressive reformers during this time period are to try to stop the power of monopolies. Remember, we said that monopolies are bad. They've passed the Sherman Antitrust Act, which said that you can't have a monopoly. Monopolies restrain trade. They limit competition. They lead to higher prices and not great quality. But unfortunately, those laws are not being enforced. And so people like Teddy are going to try to break up monopolies. He's also going to push for more rights for workers and ending child labor. We're also going to see, in terms of social changes, a push to clean up those slums, to give more rights for immigrants, to kind of protect them so that people are not discriminating or attacking them. We're going to try to see a push for equality for women and for African Americans, kind of unsuccessfully still. But there's also going to be a push to try to clean up our environment and even regulate our food industry, because as these giant factories are being created, they're creating pollution. And people had never really dealt with pollution before, but now they're starting to realize their air is getting polluted, their water is getting polluted, their land's getting bought up. And so what should happen to deal with these problems? And they start really kind of investigating not just the conditions of workers, but they start thinking about, what are these products that are coming out? Are they safe for us as people are taking different drugs? As they start drinking products like Coca-Cola, who has secret ingredients to it? What's in this magic drink that makes me feel so good? And so we're going to start to see people kind of investigating, oh, wait, does Coca-Cola have cocaine in it? What is the secret ingredient to some of these products? And there's also going to be a push towards moral reform, specifically against alcohol. It's going to focus on drugs and prostitution somewhat as well, but people are going to start to realize that as people are drunk, perhaps that's why they can't hold a job. Perhaps that's what leads to domestic violence. Maybe that's what leads to crime. So there's going to be a big push to end alcoholism in America and to actually prohibit the sale of alcohol, called prohibition. And we kind of already talked about the political changes in terms of trying to make sure that women have rights, trying to end the Jim Crow era, make sure that African Americans vote, but also to try to change the power of the political machine, to end it, so that people can vote if they want to vote. Because up until this point, there was a lot of graft or political corruption going on, and people couldn't really vote how they wanted to. Their votes were basically being bought off. So this reform movement that's come about to basically better society using research and trying to get the government to pass laws, I'm going to have a little video clip posted. I could click on this little picture down here at the bottom, which is really hard to see by this girl's feet, but I'm going to just post it separately so that if you guys want to watch it, you can. But I know obviously with time restraints, you might not want to watch it, but I'll talk about some of the specific goals of the progressive movement. I'll post that clip kind of separately. So that's what would be in my little black box there, but I'm just going to post that separately. So during this time period, journalism is really going to be the most important thing that's happening in America. In terms of how people get their news, today people get their news, some people watch TV, some people do read the newspaper. And some people, though, get their news from social media, and hopefully it's, an accurate news source. Hopefully you're looking at, an NBC and ABC, a CBS, kind of a more non-biased source. Media sources, as we talked about in the last chapter with the Pullman strike, they do have a bias, right? We looked in that assignment that they could be supporting the strikers. They could be supporting Pullman, right? And the different bosses at the factory. And the same as in our news outlets today, right? If you watch CNN or if your parents do, that tends to lean more towards the left, kind of more of a liberal view. If you watch Fox News, that tends to lean more towards the right with the conservative news. What do I watch? I tend to try to stick to NBC, ABC, CBS because, yes, the individual reporter may have bias, the station as a whole may have somewhat of a bias, but they try to stay in the middle. They try to show both sides of the story so that you can make up your own decision, which is what's really important here. And you need to be exposed to both sides, to both opinions. So during this time period, more so than ever before, the news kind of becomes important. We're starting to see more of an educated populace as people are the middle class and they're going to school longer and they're getting an education. More people are getting the ability to read. And newspapers are how they get their information. It's not like today where people can watch TV or, listen to the radio. That's going to be first really the big thing during World War I. This time period is all about getting your information from the newspaper. And we would have people who would stand on the corners of streets screaming, extra, extra, read all about it, and yelling out a headline. And of course, the headlines would try to be gruesome. They would say things like, if it bleeds, it leads. They're trying to sell a newspaper here. And they want you to buy one paper over the other. And of course, some papers did have a bias, as I mentioned. But in general, we have what's called investigative reporters or muckrakers. And I mentioned them in our last chapter. They're people who are trying to rake up the mud, the muck, the filth of society. And I think in the last chapter, I was telling you that, if someone was raking leaves, right? You might rake up leaves, mud, grass, dog poop, right? Trash wrappers, whatever. And these muckrakers, they are basically trying to show or expose or uncover the problems of society. They got the term, kind of the slang term muckrakers by Teddy Roosevelt. And they were just trying to show what was wrong with America. And the goal is not just to be Debbie Downers and focus on the problems. They're trying to make America a better place. So you want to show the problems so then we can talk about how to fix these problems. So you have kind of two groups of reporters at this point in history. You have muckrakers, who are the good guys, the investigative journalists, the ones who are doing serious news reporting, trying to sell papers, show people what's wrong with corruption, make America a better place. Then you've got these people who are called yellow journalists, and I'll talk more about them after Thanksgiving. But they're basically trying to just sell papers, and they exaggerate news stories and basically throw in some extra garbage. We'll talk more about that kind of after Thanksgiving break. But there's, of course, still yellow journalist reporters out there today that color the facts, they exaggerate, they sell gossip rags, they sell those newspapers you've seen at the grocery store checkout, like Elvis Lives, Three-Headed Alien Baby, take this diet pill and you'll lose 100 pounds. They're the kind of people who create clickbait in our modern era. So there are still yellow journalists out there who yellow or muddy the facts and change them from black and white into kind of yellow. But for the most part, we're just focusing here, at least this first part of the chapter, on muckraker journalists who really give people the news. So the guy in the picture there, that's Lincoln Steffens. And he wrote a famous book called The Shame of Cities. And it really talked about how people had just thought that political machines were very powerful in places like New York City with the powerful Tammany Hall political machine and Boss Tweed kind of running things, and everyone was on the take or the pay, and people were pretty much doing whatever the political machine said to get a job, and you didn't cross them. But he shows that, oh, wait a minute, this is basically happening in a lot of other cities, including Philadelphia. He talked about how powerful the political machine was there, about how many of the major industrialists, like Carnegie and such, were using their money and influence to pay politicians to kind of look the other way about their monopolies. And to not break up their different trusts and such. Now, these muckrakers, it just says at the bottom there, authors who expose the political and corporate corruption. They were published in magazines like McClure's and Collier's. It's kind of hard to read there at the bottom. It's right cut off. But just authors who expose political and corporate corruptions, published in magazines like McClure and Collier's. Jacob Riis, I also mentioned him in the last chapter. He was a photojournalist, and as Easton Kodak comes out with the Kodak camera during this time, really only the middle class can afford to buy it, or the wealthy. But some photographers like him, as they start to tell their story with pictures, and it's not just people drawing images anymore, we're starting to actually get real photographic evidence. You can't deny the picture. The picture's worth 1,000 words, and people start to say, oh my gosh, this is how people actually live. These immigrants have to live so many people in one apartment. They can't even afford to find their own, or there's not enough housing in a city, so they have to all live together because they just can't find an open flat, an open apartment. They said this is ridiculous. And there's rats, and there's not enough bathrooms, and it's dirty, and the roof leaks, and it's overpriced. And so it really was kind of showing, some of the problems in society. And yet again, there should be a video clip right there. I'll attach that separately if you want to watch it. It's kind of interesting. And the reason, I guess, Jacob Riis, as a muckraker, as a photojournalist, his articles were so shocking and made people say, we need to build more apartment buildings. We need to make sure they have bathrooms. We need to make sure they're up to fire safety code. They shouldn't be so close together. They shouldn't be made out of wood, because we see how quickly fires spread, like the Great Chicago Fire. That was just so shocking to people, because you had people like Thorstein Veblen, who was publishing the theory of the leisure class, which showed the lavish parties that Carnegie and Rockefeller and this old money, as it was called, compared to the new money, the people who were just coming into making fortunes, the Vanderbilts and such. It showed how much money these people had and how they were participating in what we call conspicuous consumption, purposely buying fancy cars and huge mansions and having a staff and all these fancy clothes to show off their money, just like people do today, through Instagram and, influencers and things like that. So it was, in comparison, as people saw in the newspaper, this is what high society is doing compared to this is what the vast majority of Americans are doing, that it really made the middle class, kind of gave them a wake-up call and said, hey, we need to change things. This is wrong. Now, is the government going to be hugely focused on helping the poor? Not really. We're going to see more settlement houses created, run by people like Jane Addams to try to help the poor. And maybe some, wealthy people will kind of buy more into the gospel of wealth, Carnegie's idea that the wealthy should give money to the poor and things like that. And they'll donate to universities and settlement houses. But there's still no minimum wage. That's way too much of a communist socialist idea that you're going to pay everybody the same or a minimum amount. That's not going to come about until the Great Depression. So muckrakers are really highlighting the problems, but they don't bring about a whole lot of change. Now, Ida Tarbell, the woman in the picture, she's incredibly famous. She writes the history of Standard Oil. She publishes in Collier's and McClure's, which are women's magazines. She also, because at first people don't take her seriously because she's a woman, but she also publishes, in newspapers and such, and she starts to show how corrupt Standard Oil is and how Rockefeller has participated in this horizontal integration and how he's a robber baron and how he pushed out the competition. And eventually, her magazine articles do lead to change. We do start to see that slowly Standard Oil Trust is breaking up a little bit enforcement of the Sherman Antitrust Act. So some of these muckrakers are successful in bringing about change. Like Jacob Riis, they at least get New York City to build some more apartments and to have some fire safety codes and more bathrooms put in. And Ida Tarbell does get, some people to examine what Rockefeller is doing and to break up a little bit of his company. But other, ones are not as successful about really bringing about change. Now, another famous muckraker during this time is John Spargo, and he writes The Bitter Cry of the Children, and he says, it's crazy. We've got kids who are 5 years old, some in cases 4. The parents just, they're like, okay, I don't have anybody to watch my kid. They're 4, but they're a well-behaved 4-year-old. I'm going to put them to work and let's lie and say my kid's 5. And they're having their kids work from basically, just like them, 7 a.m. until 5 p.m. And this is a 4 or 5-year-old child, and they're going to get only 60 cents for doing that work. And he just said it's ridiculous. And he really started to kind of highlight how many accidents were happening for children because they got tired. It was way too long of a day for them. I mean, we're talking about kids who would be in preschool at this point, maybe not even in kindergarten in America in today's world. So he really starts to show that. And we start to really see kind of just all of this happening. And so it's going to lead to change. We're finally going to see not an outlaw child labor. That won't come about yet again either to Great Depression. But we're going to start to see that some of the presidents, specifically President Taft, is really focused on ending child labor in America. He creates the Children's Bureau. And we start to see that some people refuse to buy products which are made by child laborers. So we are going to start to slowly, see some change. Lewis Hine, the guy in the bottom picture, he was a school teacher, and he ends up being a muckraker during the Progressive Era. He, yet again, is a photographer, trying to really show the problems in America, specifically with child labor as well. So are they successful? They get a lot of people interested in the topic and exposed to the topic, but not necessarily hard legislation to end it nationwide. We will see some states starting to outlaw child labor, but it won't become illegal nationwide till, yet again, Great Depression was when we'll see, minimum wage and ended child labor. Here's just some pictures, some of the most famous ones. The one here on the bottom left, this is in Newberry, South Carolina in 1908. You can see the girl in the factory standing by herself. You might see the one of the breaker boys in the top. Those are kids who work in the coal mines there. And it says, "Lad fell to death in big coal chute." Those are some of the most famous pictures, but you can see they're just kids. In some cases they might be 8 or 10, but for the most part, they're just kids, and they're spending their entire childhood working to help support their families. You can see the other pictures. That's in Midnight, Indiana, in a glass factory, and in the bottom right, that's the shrimp pickers in St. Louis, Missouri. So these are all pictures from 1908 on the left and 1911 on the right, but it is a difficult life for these kids. And so the muckrakers will help kind of bring about, some change, but perhaps not enough. Now, other issues which are going to be highlighted during this time period have to do with factory conditions in general. And we're not going to really see more, higher wages yet. That's not going to come about, as I said, to Great Depression, New Deal in the 30s. But we are going to see safer conditions come about. And I think you guys learned about this in 8th grade when you learned about different disasters. If you forgot, or you weren't in that group, or you just never learned it, I'll post a video clip that kind of talks about this. But the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire was basically in 1913, and the manager didn't want them going on too many smoke breaks or lunch breaks. He wanted them to stay in and work. He actually locked them into the garment factory. A fire starts, they're not able to get out, and some people actually choose to jump to their death because they think that somehow they'll land on an awning or just break a leg and be okay, but 146 people die in this fire. There was no fire escape. I don't think, now I'm trying to remember, maybe there was a fire escape and it broke. I guess I should go back and watch the video clip myself. But there was no smoke detector at this time, there's no sprinkler system, and that's all going to bring about change. After this disaster where 146 people die, we're going to start to see changes happening in terms of how employers should treat their factory workers and just kind of fire safety codes. We're going to see the creation of more fire departments with the city because it takes them a long time. One of the big issues here was the fire department literally didn't have a ladder that was like high enough to get up to this high level, in this tenement, in this apartment building, this factory, to try to put out the fire. So they're just going to be thinking about all these things as far as how to design a fire truck and where are the fire departments located and how high should a ladder go and do we have enough water pressure and do we have a sprinkler system? And this is going to help bring about change. And unfortunately, sometimes there has to be strikes or disasters to bring about that change. I also said before, the woman in the picture, that's Jane Addams on the left, and that's Hull House in Chicago. And we already talked about this a lot last chapter, but she is kind of someone who emerges here during the Gilded Age and becomes more popular during the Progressive Era as she really focuses on the social gospel, that the Christian thing to do is to help others, and you help others help themselves. And it's very similar, to the gospel of wealth. Remember, that was Carnegie's idea that if you're born rich, if God lets you be in a rich family, you should use your money to help others. You shouldn't die wealthy, you should give it away. And he definitely kind of lived by that philosophy during his later years. Well, she also believes that the Christian thing to do is to help others, perhaps help themselves. And this really catches on with the middle class, especially as Jacob Riis and Lewis Hine and Ida Tarbell and these different, muckrakers are showing the problems in America. The middle class and the wealthy are very quick to donate their money or their time, their energy to places like Hull House, so that They could try to help educate immigrants or the poor, to give them skills like typing classes or English classes, to give them daycare, a place to sleep. And I think I told you in the last chapter, it was kind of a mixture of an unemployment agency with with a homeless shelter. It provided so many skills. And, Jane Addams was an early kind of social worker. We consider her a sociologist in case you want to take sociology next year, where we talk about society's problems. And the other thing, as far as, it's kind of social or moral reform, it's not just going to be about improving working conditions or improving living conditions or kind of helping immigrants. There is also this crusade called temperance, where people really started to say that alcohol should be illegal, that it leads to problems. And I love the political cartoon in the bottom right corner, where that's alcohol and it's a monster. And you can see, has she a fair chance? And literally that alcoholic monster is going to get that little girl. And, it says, don't be misled. If you look at the posters on the left, it says, the brewers have the money, we have the facts, come in and see. So basically saying, they're conning you, you're going to get drunk, they're going to take all your money. And the other one says, don't be misled. The liquor traffic is a financial waste, a physical inefficiency. Remember prohibition. It reduces vice, crime, power, persuasion, taxes, and it increases happiness, business, and wealth. So this Women's Christians Temperance Union and this Anti-Saloon League were two different groups which basically said part of the problem in America is that people are getting drunk and then they're, not able to work, participating in domestic violence, committing crimes, and alcohol is the entire problem. And so we need to end the creation, the usage, the distribution of alcohol in America. And slowly over time, you can see that individual states are starting to ban alcohol. And you can see that many of the states, like Iowa was 1916, in Illinois, it was a local option, meaning that in some communities, like in a county, it might be banned, like in Henry County, but in Chicago, it was still legal. Other states like Alabama, it had been banned since 1915, or Oklahoma 1907. Basically, more conservative communities thought that it really went against religious values and banned it earlier. Other states, though, are not going to officially ban alcohol until the 18th Amendment to the Constitution gets passed, basically in 1919. So right as World War I is coming to an end, prohibition will get passed nationwide, where many people feel that if we end the usage of alcohol, we'll end a lot of problems, we'll create happier people and a better America. And that's it for now, guys. So have a great day, take your notes, and get your vocab done and work on that Edpuzzle. Later.